Now I would like to hand over these things to Professor Kishwar Kamal. And in the beginning, Mehzad Ghalib, she's going to present the keynote paper. But before, I think, Kishwar Kamal, you can ask her to participate. Now we can
Okay. A very good morning to all of you. We have a keynote paper by Mehzad Ghalib, and it entitles A Few Good Films, Alternative Representation of Women in Films in the 70s in Bangladesh. So I would request Ms. Mehzad Ghalib to present her paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This one is
Yeah, you can have it. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to the first session of the 7th Dhaka International Conference on Women in Cinema. Title of my keynote paper is A Few Good Films, Alternative Representation of Women in Films in the 70s in Bangladesh. Feminist studies are not organized in Bangladesh in any discipline, and therefore it is hardly surprising that it is almost absent in the film arena and in popular cinema. Feminist ideologies began to set in after our liberation through enhancing social awareness and women's reform by NGO, which had been just started their operations. But that is a kind of pressurized feminism by Western donors because these NGOs were or are financially dependent on Westerners. The feminist approach is now pervading the film arena, mostly in the documentary film world and to some extent in the independent fiction film arena. There is a handful of films shown in the Dhaka International Film Festival in the past years, which have strong female representation both on and off the screen. For example, Rising Silence, directed by Lisa Gaji, Botul Bhoot, directed by Meher Afroz Shaun, Devi, produced by Jaya Asan, the short film, Statement After My Poet Husband's Death, directed by Tasmia Afrin Mo. Filmmaker Rubaiyat Hossain's Made in Bangladesh has been widely popular in the international film festivals. Rubaiyat uses a feminist lens to deconstruct the otherwise male-dominated institution of cinema. Veteran filmmaker Shamim Akhtar, in her debut film Itihash Konna, 1999, standing against the commercial representation of women in the mainstream films, presented the torture on women and the issue of war children in a different light. All of these films belong to the independent film sector. There is a history behind this success of the independent films in Bangladesh. If we look back, the late 70s and 80s, when discerning audiences have been driven away from the cinemas, the only ray of hope appeared from direction of Film Society movement. Unlike in most countries, the Cine Club movement here took upon itself the additional task of initiating a socially responsible cinema alongside creating a sizable clan of cultured audience. The genre of alternative cinema in Bangladesh over 30 years now has been coming more and more to the foreground and receiving nationwide attention with raised expectancy. The international success of Chaka, The Wheel, 1993, the short film by eminent director and one of the pioneers of the independent film movement Moshudun Islam, with a number of prestigious awards in European film festivals, and the phenomenal popular success of Muktir Gan, Song of Freedom, by Tariq and Catherine Masood have uplifted the whole alternative cinema movement to a higher plane. But what about the mainstream films? In Bangladesh, women in cinema are always shown from a male point of view: submissive, passive, tortured, and evil, or the epitome of beauty and sacrifice. These are the archetypes of their characters, designed by the desire of male viewers. In mainstream popular cinema in Bangladesh, a director creates a voyeuristic situation only for box office purposes. The film's women normally satisfy the male gaze of the audiences without setting any logic. It is more visibly created in song sequences. Male-dominant socioeconomic, political, and cultural power structure constructs this image of women. This way of looking at women in cinema not only portrays the passive role of women in society, but also works as a catalyst to continue the dominant ideology of patriarchal society. In the year 1971, we got independence. The independence of Bangladesh has been built upon the combined struggle and bloodshed of men and women. But the mainstream films made on Muktijuddho has been composed, evading the contribution of women freedom fighters and the participation of overall women folk of the country. The construction of women in the Liberation War films began with the framework of ideal women of pre-liberation film industry of East Pakistan, which was essentially the face of domestic women. Though it was the film that showed the nation fulfilling its aspiration to become an independent country, this calling was not meant for the women of the film. The framework of sons preparing for the country's liberation war, the daughters continued in post-liberation films, according to Kaberi Garan. Except for Guerrilla 2011, women's participation as direct freedom fighters is totally absent in war films. The nation had to wait for 40 years to get an on-screen female freedom fighter. Besides rape victims, other characters in which women are represented include caregivers under the male doctors in medical centers. Ora 11 জন, সংগ্রাম, মেঘের অনেক রং, prostitutes, রক্ত বাংলা, বাঘা বাঙালি, shelter givers to freedom fighters, কলমি লতা, আগুনে পরশমণি, হাঙ্গর নদী গ্রেনেড, and informants, ওরা 11 জন. The roles of these side characters are limited to a handful. The screen time these characters receive is also very short, according to Kaberi Gayan. But there were a few good men of 70s who broke away from the male gaze when the complement heroes' actions, female characters in Bangladeshi mainstream cinema are present as objects. First political satire of Bangladesh, Jibon Theke Neya, was released in 1970. Jibon Theke Neya is one of the finest movies directed by the legendary author, director Johir Raihan. It was made in the backdrop of the 1952 language movement of former East Pakistan, metaphorically, where an autocratic woman in one family symbolizes the political dictatorship of Ayub Khan in East Pakistan. First women filmmaker of Bangladesh, Rebecca, made her film Bindu Theke Britto in 1970. In the same decade, few steps were taken by the government from the betterment of films such as National Award, Grant for the Art and Independent Film in 1970. But women's identities were not projected in the mainstream films, separating herself from her father, her husband, and her sons. In the most of 70s popular films, the representation of women were coded with strong visuals and erotic impact so that they can be visually pleasing. I'm going to present or reintroduce, I would say, The three films, which I believe to be very important films from 70s. However, they are very different in aesthetic approach and also in terms of women representations. They are also represent three different genres. One is an independent film, Surya Dikhalbari, The Ominous House, acclaimed both locally and internationally. Other represents the mainstream film, Golapi Ekon Traine, The Endless Trail. The final one treads the middle path, Surya Daughter of the Sun. I would start with Surya Daughter of Sun. Surya is directed by Alamgir Kabir. It was released in 1975. Let us look at the plot. Lenin Chaudhary is painter from a middle-class struggling family of post-independence Bangladesh, searching for a job. He is an imaginative person who endeavors to eradicate suffering of people. One day, he meets his college friend Russell, who has returned from abroad and started his own business. Lenin tells him about his situation. Russell gives him a job in one of his shops as interior designer. Lenin makes an incarnation of a female shape and talks with it every night during his duty time. He fancies her as daughter of sun, who is captive and abandoned by male-dominated society. He waits to find her in his real life. What I found most fascinating is the narrative of the film, which is very unique. To me, this is an experimental theme which has focused on the social issues of post-independence Bangladesh. At the same time, this film is made from a very feminist angle. Surya is made within the structure of mainstream cinema, but with a very different aesthetic approach. I assume it is because of Alamgir Kabir, the director of the film. Who is he? He is the pioneer of the alternative and independent film movement in Bangladesh. In the early 70s, he went to Oxford to study engineering, where he had a chance to watch Ingmar Bergman's film, The Seventh Seal. This film influenced his life immensely, and he became very interested in filmmaking. He did few filmmaking courses in England, and at the same time, he was highly influenced by the leftist ideology. So we can easily imagine why he named his main protagonist of the film Lenin. Lenin is also his only son's name. The plot of the film has been written surrounding Lenin's own thoughts. Lenin's characterization is drawn based on existentialism and Freud's psychoanalysis theory. His artist mind switches between reality and fantasy. He stays at the shop during the night for redecorating it. The mannequin becomes alive in the night, with which he shares the untold and unfulfilled dreams and desire. The ID, ego, and superego are the three aspects of mind Freud believed to comprise Lenin's personality. The mannequin is the recreation of his own mind. The unconscious mind of Lenin creates the mannequin with all the thoughts, feelings, cognitions, and memories he acknowledges in the daily life. In 1970, the middle class or even lower middle class society in Dhaka, where Lenin belonged, he noticed his mother and his sister are always living in an oppressed patriarchal society. He creates a woman who is the representative of a free world where men and women are equal, not oppressed by the patriarchal society. The character of the mannequin is the symbol of freedom of women. She is representing for such a society in which women's power is equal to men's and in which the culture centers around values and life events described as feminine. This kind of thinking or representation of women in Bangladeshi cinema is really thought-provoking and groundbreaking. I think this is the only film which focused directly on the feminist issue with a surreal and completely different representation of women in Bangladeshi cinema. Socialist feminism rose in 1960 and 70s as an offshoot of the feminist movement and new left that focuses upon the interconnectivity of the patriarchy and the capitalism. Socialist feminists argue that liberation can only be achieved by working to end both the economic and cultural sources of women's oppression. Shujakona is highly inspired by this thought. Alamgir Kabir was very modern thinking and highly motivated by the concept of feminism or equality of men and women. We can see Lenin going to his anthropologist uncle to verify her mannequin friend really wanted to say. This is the first time in Bangladeshi cinema it is explained with the help of animation. Lenin's anthropologist uncle was explaining the history of women in the ancient era. I think this was very innovative and interesting way to add the animation to give it a feeling of a fairy tale. The interesting way to add the animation, the mannequin told Lenin how women were free at the prehistoric era and ruled the world. Then men plotted against them, and with their physical strength, they restrained the women and detained them in the house for giving birth of children and only doing the household work. We can watch it in an animation using first time in Bangladeshi cinema. It was quite experimental. The song she sang, Ami Je Adhare Bondini, is beautifully expressed the social condition of women, showing severely confined by religion and by the patriarchal society, and how she wants to overcome the situation with help of Lenin. Lenin named his imaginary woman friend Labono from the novel Rabindranath Tagore, Venus, the Roman goddess, and in so many names. As I want to say that this is a unique representation of women on the screen, but there are few film critics in Bangladesh criticize Shudrakona, saying Alamgir Kabir's created a false and fantasized freedom of women, which is fabricated by the knowledge of capitalists and from the perspective of male ego and male gaze. But to me, Shudrakana's pointed crisis is oppression of women under the men's supremacy and their freedom from it. Shujokonna, or daughter of sun, is a symbol. Maybe the philosophy of the freedom of women of Lenin is not very insistent or revolutionary, but it has been perceived by the position of women surrounding him. That created a controversy between some of the renowned critics in the country at that time. The life in the domestic world and the oppressed dream which he has observed in the daily middle class life in his mother and his sister has shaped in building the mannequin. His unfulfilled desires, suppressed feelings have come out as a form of the mannequin. In the end, I will say this is completely a different film made under the umbrella of the mainstream film industry. Should I take a break, ma'am, or should I continue?
If anybody has any questions on this particular
Konna, yes.
কারো কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকলে কারণ আরেকটাতে চলে গেলে হয়তো এটা আমরা একটু আবার পেছনে যেতে হবে সেদিকে বলছি কারো যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে any observations can I ask you something
Yes.
now since you are the expert and you've been researching on it very deeply it's really highly appreciable the way you have looked at it because I must say personally when I witnessed this film I was quite young I was in my late teens and I never saw it through that dimension which is so very interesting and you have also mentioned that it is like a juxtaposition with the between the reality and fantasy
Yes.
which is beautiful and very, very unique, no doubt. And I don't know if anybody else has done that. I'm just talking in the context of Bangladesh.
No, not in the Bangladeshi cinema. I haven't seen, such representation. It is actually basically very surrealist treatment. Actually, he tried, and it was taken. I mean, by the film lovers and critics, of course, but there are actually very few problems. I mean, I think which is because he had to sacrifice, because of the financing of the film. So he had to give it a little bit commercial touch. But yet, this is very, very unique and difficult task to do at that time. Yes.
And this music, which you said, Amiji Andhare Bondini.
Yes.
The song of the heroine.
Ma'am, can you just say it in an English explanation, I think?
Yeah.
Just one line, yes.
Yeah. Amiji Andhare Bondini means I am captive in the confinement of darkness. This is the song. That's the very essence of it. It's very symbolical.
Very symbolic, yes.
Because women those days, and you mentioned the Alamgir Kabir's wife, mother, sister, and the society at large.
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, it was a very conformistic society. It still is, if you think in a greater, larger aspect of it. So the song itself, Ami je andhare bondini, amake
Amare alote deke nao, yes.
deke nao. I'm confined in the darkness. Please call me from the light, in the world of light. This is the very theme of the film itself, and the use of the mannequin, which he he gives life to the mannequin, and he fantasizes, he imagines it's like a beautiful lady, maybe his beloved or somebody that who chants him, but she wants to come out of it. এই বন্দিত্ব থেকে বেরিয়ে আসতে চাইছে। হ্যাঁ, তো এটাই একটা symbolical একটা representation. And the juxtaposition which you mentioned between the fantasy and reality, সেটাও একদিকে ওনার তো টাকা পয়সার একটু সমস্যা ছিল, he had the economic constraints while making the film, but at the same time,
at the time frame also, 1970 to 71, after just liberation, it was, there was a very kind of financial depression in the country also. Yes.
At the same time, he had to cater it to the general audience. It was widely accepted and popular. It was a very popular movie. So mind you, I mean, apart from the intellectual, the philosophical theme of the film, he accessed it to everyone. It touched everyone. So that's the greatness of the maker and the film itself.
I think so, yes, yes. Thank you very much. So, Riti, anything to say, or should I carry on? Okay, I'm not here. Okay. The next film I'm discussing, the title of the film is Shurjo Dighal Bari. Shurjo Dighal Bari, The Amina's House, is a 1979 Bangladeshi feature film directed by Sheikh Niamat Ali and Mushiuddin Shakir, two veteran film club activists of the 1960s and 70s. The film was made with a state grant and based on a renowned novel of the same title by a respected Bengali Muslim novelist Abu Ishaq. It was the first time made from the Bangladesh government's grant. The film won Bangladesh National Film Award in 7 categories, including Best Film, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Actress. It also won 5 international awards, including Mannheim Film Festival and Portugal Film Society, and many others. What's the plot? A poor family returns to their village from Dhaka after the Great Bengal famine in 1943. These movies centers on their struggling life during the World War II period. This family is headed by Jaigun, a woman. She is a poor Bengali Muslim woman and divorced. In the Shurjo Dighal Bari, Jaigun is representative of the victim of time, and other characters has given her fulfillment. She doesn't believe either in the superstition or in fate. She believes that man is the designer of his destiny. Under the persecution of starvation, she realizes that the only truth in this world is the stomach. All the rest, including religion, God, society, is meaningless and hollow. She can believe in fate like the traditional religious people. We see the influence of fundamentalism here also. The mullahs of the village don't want the women of the village to roam around or work outside. They demand that indoors is the appropriate place for women. But they can't ensure the basic necessities of the women. They claim that God is the determiner of physic or sustenance. Jagun can't trust this at all. Jagun travels to the nearby town by train and sells rice in a bid to earn enough to feed her two children. As she going out of the home and roaming around the village and city, she becomes impious according to the mullahs. When her chicken lays its first eggs, Jagun sends them to the village mosque. However, the imam of the mosque and the village guardians return them saying that since she does not follow Padda and she is impious, the eggs of a chicken is haram, forbidden, and can't be received by the mosque. According to Dr. Zakir Hossain Raju, chicken eggs thus become the symbolic site of contest between Bengali culture and Islam in the ominous house. The production and circulation of the ominous house and the genealogy of Bangladeshi art cinema as a cultural institution closely linked to Western modernity confirms that this cinematic discourse mainly reconstructs and reinforces the Bengali Islam dichotomy on cinema screens. Most of these films represent Islamic learning as anti modern and arcane, using the identity question of for Bengali Muslims as the basis. Jagan is a progressive woman in a regressive society. This backward society doesn't let her lead a life of her own. Jagun becomes compelled to marry off her immature daughter and again criticized. Everybody asks whether the daughter of an outward woman can be taken as daughter-in-law. This immature girl loses her virginity before knowing anything about sexuality. Jagun's son becomes stranger to her, yet we don't see Jagun lose her mental strength at that time. Gaddu Pradhan is one of the influential political leaders wanted to marry Jagun as his third wife. Jagun refused. He is the creator of superstitions for his own benefit. He hires people to throw stones to the premise of Surjadikal Bari. To preserve his own benefit and political power. Jagun stands strongly against this political power and never became afraid. Made in a neo-realistic style, Shurjidi Gulbari is the first film produced by Bangladesh government. Very talented actress Dolly Anwar did very good job as Jaigun. This is very strong and different representation of women in Bangladeshi cinema. In these circumstances, during the 70s and 80s, the notion of national cultural modernity and Bengali identity as an opposition to Islam and Muslim identity acted to develop a national art cinema in post-colonial Bangladeshi, said Dr. Zakir Hossain Raju. Shall I carry on? After I finish, right? Okay. So yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, here is the third film, the last film, Golapi Ekhon Traine. Golapi Ekhon Traine, the English name is Golapi is now on a train, and the Endless Trail is directed by Amjad Hussain, who adapted his own novel Draupadi Ekhon Traine. This film was released in 1978 and enjoyed both critical and commercial success. Three village women from the different age group travel free through the local train to Mymensingh Divisional City. They collect rice and wheat from the government relief fund and sell them in the train or in the village in a cheap price and run their families. The main cast, or the central female character of the film, named Golapi, was a very young girl whose father was singer and poet who travels to different village with his singing group. But they had their own little land and house. Golapi's mother runs the household. Their parents always sheltered Golapi and her little sister from the harsh struggle of life. On the other hand, the neighbor Moina, who is around 30 years old woman, was married to Manik. Manik was injured in a fight and lost his leg. He was not able to do work anymore. He worked as a henchman of the village chairman to grab the land of the village people. Moina went to the village chairman for help. She mortgaged her land to the chairman and took some money. She could not repay the money, so he grabbed the land of Moina's husband, Gulape Contraina. Traine very nakedly exposes the social condition of the village at that time. Mondol, ATM Shamsujjaman, a very powerful actor of our country, is an influential person in the village. His son Milan Farooq, another very powerful actor of our country, likes Golapi. In the meantime, Mondol brings a bridegroom for Golapi, but they demand a cycle. Golapi's father cannot afford this, so Milan pay for the cycle. But some reason the marriage does not take place and Golapi's father commits suicide. As a result, Golapi's family falls apart and she starts to work in different places by train. The people from the village do not take this positively and set to stop them from working on trains. This dictatorial tendency of the chairman and so-called village leaders include land grabbing, eviction, and violence against poor village in the Bangladesh are not uncommon. In this film, the chairman grabbed the ancestral property of the poor people. To me, the story is represented from a very realistic and at the same time from the feminist point of view. Attitude towards women are very different and completely out of male gaze theory, at least to me. Golapi's father was an artist and he was very respectful to his wife, who used to take care of the house and his children while he was away for singing. In the song ও তোদের মা জননী আমার সাধের খঞ্জনী সুখের গলায় লটকা আছে অসুরের বন্ধন. Golapi's father makes fun of her can't sing in melody, but in the answer, his daughters also praised her mother, saying how she is the asset of his household. This is a very sensitive representation of woman by her husband and a child. On the other hand, in the same film, the moral was very harsh to his wife, who had no voice to her own household. On the other hand, Moina and the old woman whose house has been taken and had played a very strong role when their family needed them most. It was very hard at that time for the Muslim village women to go to the train and doing business. The old woman who was their Partner joined them because her son doesn't look after her and she has to earn her own bread and butter. Moina's husband used to beat her because she was going to the town, but he could not stop her because their children will starve. It was a very difficult task at that time to travel in the local train without tickets. In this patriarchal society of the village of the 70s, it is more difficult. Sometimes they had to be very tough with the people, and sometimes they had to be tricky to shop owner who used to give them rice and wheat, but he always indicated for sexual desire. We can see a worker offered money to Golapi to have sex with him in the train station. Golapi was very strong and she refused it. Moina always protected Golapi, but at the same time, they enjoyed their freedom. This depiction came very nicely in the film. They go to the station hotel, buy their own food with their money, and enjoyed the meal. After that, we can see they smoke bidis while waiting, while resting in the station. They smoke very confidently in front of men. It feels like earning gives them an empowerment, a confidence to do so. They use different tricks to get rice and wheat from the government shop with the shopkeeper. These women are contributing in the society by earning money. These women are not object of desire by men only, but have their own identity. Sitting on the train station and smoking bidi gives these women their freedom. Director Amjad Hussain took very bold step to make such a strong feminist film within the mainstream film industry. After so many years, films have been made representing women. One of the great examples is Rubaiyat Hussain's Made in Bangladesh. Main protagonist Shimu, a textile worker, fights for employee rights after a co-worker is killed in a fire factory in Dhaka, Bangladesh. This film is very much praised in the international film festivals. I think you all know that. But this film reminds me of Golapi Akhuntreni. Golapi Akhuntreni was made following the same thought that together women must fight and find a way. Rubaiya's film is an independent film and by international fund, but Golapi Akhuntreni was made inside the mainstream film industry at that time. Director Amjad Hussain started his career in the mainstream film, but he had a vision and a political commitment for the society. Amjad Hussain started writing rhymes and poems at his early age. He also wrote short stories, juvenile stories, and novels. Hussain was directly connected with mass uprising in 1969 against Ayub Khan and Liberation War of Bangladesh in 1971. He was involved in the script writing of Jibon Theke Neya, the film I mentioned above. The film examines the rural society of Bengali Muslim, which is controlled by male elites of the village. Their primary subjects to be ruled were working women, though the leadership of the revolt is ultimately handed over the males. The reason of millions' revolt was primarily for Golapi, but he quickly connected it to the greater social oppression. The film was critically acclaimed and commercially successful by Famidil Haq. Being involved in the mainstream film industry, Amjad's representation of women in this film is really praiseworthy. Not following the popular trend, Golapi Akhuntreni became very popular and had positive critical receptions. The main protagonist, Golapi, played by veteran actress Bobita, who has worked with Satyajit Ray in his film Ashwini Sanket. In an era where commercial films were made to capture the viewer's interest with the objectification of women, these films broke and mold As a film society activist, I have taken this wonderful opportunity to share my thoughts and to present this alternative representation of women in Bangladeshi cinema in front of you all. Thank you very much and stay safe, everyone. Yes, ma'am. So, can you see us? Sue?
Yes, I see you. Hi,
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for your great speech. I really enjoyed it and I really had a good time with the speech.
Thank you
I
very
had
much.
a good thought about our background, our history in cinema history because of your paper. Thank you for this opportunity to meet you.
Thank you very much for being with us. I think Appa will continue. Thank you very much.
I cannot see you, but your mic sound is kind of echoing. I cannot see you clearly. I cannot hear clearly.
Can, excuse me, Sue.
Yes,
Can
I
you
can
hear
hear
now?
you.
Okay, so
Yes.
now I'm audible. Could I request you to put forward your own opinions or your observations on the keynote paper? Sue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I have a not so deep knowledge of your cinema history and your three examples of films I did not see before, but because of her paper, I could get the idea about what kind of film they were. It was very well prepared and bright point of view, and I really had a good time to read and see through. Um, uh, the thing was so many interesting I found from your paper compared to our history, our cinema history, or our culture. For example, about those are three ladies who smoke in front of males in public, and they feel so free from their smoking. And it reminds me that about 1990s, 1990, the beginning of 1990s in Korea, so women could not smoke in public. Even 1990s, even women who tried to smoking in public, you could see easily the men on the street will surround her and yell her that, how dare you? You're a woman and you smoke in public. That was in our public too. So
I didn't know that. I never heard
yeah,
of it. That
that's a
in Korea,
1990.
yes. It's very
You were,
interesting. But here in Bangladesh, it's a very old tradition that village women, they used to smoke a special kind of cigarette. It's actually not, I mean, it is made by some herbs or something. It is a tobacco leaf, but not the cigarette. They're not the same thing, right? They call biri. Biri is the thing. Yeah. Okay.
so in
Okay.
Korea too, like you are very old and you lived in a village and you smoke in front of other people, it'll be okay. But I'm talking about 1990s in
Yes.
Seoul,
Yes. Yes.
big city, and if you are a young woman who try to smoke in front of public, then you will be actually lynched by men. That much male dominant society. Still, I can see young women smoking on the public in Korea right now, but there is no range because our law became very strong to protect women's rights and everything. But still, our inside law, not like no outside of law, inside, people would think that the woman is not a good person who smoke on the public, who smoke on the
Yeah.
street. Might be the same thing with the
Yes.
all over. Like men who smoke on public on the street, it's okay. It's no problem. Or even if a old man smoke in the meeting room, and people would think that he would be a PhD or well educated. Even smoking shows that kind of label. But women who started to smoke in front of meeting room, people with in the meeting, woman tried to smoke, then oh my God, we still have that kind of cultural background. I was thinking that, and then so many reasons we have not the law, not the system, because now in Korea the system is a very well developed for protecting the woman's rights. But it's from our cultural background. For example, like nationalism or
Yes.
patriotism or Confucianism. Those are from our history, our culture. And it usually showed who is the good woman. So
Yeah.
actually in the movie theater or drama, nowadays young directors or young filmmakers try to make their own stories in film. And most of people think that the scale is too narrow to show something. Well, in other ways, like there is a wonder lady who became a superpower, and we said, wow, it should be a feminism film, but it's too idle. It's just like from your imaginary person, a lady who has a superpower. But actually, documentary or from the drama, still the woman is a very tame. Woman is usually follows the system, our law, our culture. Yeah. That thing is still going around. So it's from the 1970s. You were talking about the women's image in the cinema, Bangladesh, from 1970. But still, I can read your speech, the paper, very deeply with my understanding. This is still continuing, I think.
Yeah, very interesting. Yes.
Did I make myself clear?
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, yes. So I really love your point of view of that thing, and also from a plus. Excuse me. In our society, we are greatly blooms in capitalism. So from 1970s, actually, you're all those kind of woman images, like woman in the poor from the poor family, or woman from the village, woman who try to against your religious culture. Plus, we have a woman who was totally wasted by capitalism, commercialized. Like that kind of image we had too. So it was very vividly. 1970s, I tried to find the film, the woman's images from our film, the cinema history. There's worse than your images from in Bangladesh. I feel that way. And so I was very interested. I was actually very interested in my culture, our cinema history, because of your paper. To try to compare both of them, and I will think about more thought about that too. So it's a good opportunity.
না আপনি তো অ্যাড করেন আপনি ওর সাথে একটু ডিসকাশনটা আগান মানে আমি এটা শিফট করা যায় কি যাচ্ছে না যাবে না ওকে আপা তাহলে আসেন একটু আমি জাস্ট মানে আপনি একটু ইয়ে করলে আর কি ওর সাথে যদি ভিউটা ইয়ে করেন শেয়ার না সো তো বলতেছে আপা থাকলে ভালো হয় না
No, it's okay. Let her carry on. I think that's fine.
ওকে আমি ডিসকাশনের মতো হলে হ্যাঁ সেটাই বলছি you carry on no problem we have only one mic so we are actually I'm tired so giving Riti so yeah.
Yeah, I can understand after such a long discussion, Tumpapu, and it was such a thorough discussion. Thank you so much for this. We're sure you're very tired. And also, there's another introduction to Tumpapu. She made a film called A Day at the Armenian Church that was here 2 years ago.
1 year ago last year
1 year ago. 1 year ago, and it made the rounds in some festivals. And one good observation I have about that film is that we have these things, these monuments, just like in half an hour drive from our, where we live. But we never like take the time to explore it in depth and try to discover how it came into being and who are associated with these things. So thank you so much for doing these things, for doing that film and for doing this paper. And Suli, hi, how are you? Yeah, we've been meeting in. Yes, Sue, can you? Yeah, you can carry on, and I'll just.
I don't know.
I'll just give her a break. Yeah.
I was just made my point of that the paper. It really reminded me for the women's image from our cinema history, and it's a great opportunity to have my thought about the women's image from our cinema. So thank you. It's a great paper.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Sue, did you want to say something about the women representation in Korea in films in the 70s? Do you want to expand on it?
Well, 1970s almost the same as the women's images from Bangladesh. Is very interesting. We have a very the big similarity. We are big difference from our culture, but the same some point of view of a woman's image are very similar. So it was very interesting. And the plus I told you about our women's image is just totally wasted because commercialized in capitalism society. So women should be very sexy, and women should be very. If somebody has a sexy and strong, they usually tend to be not a good person, bad woman who tried to steal your husband or like that kind of image they usually made. And from the 1970s, women from the poor family or who tried to against our society, our nationalism society, it didn't really come to woman's role. It usually went to men's role. The woman's usually acted as a side role, as a mother, as a girlfriend, as a wife, as a daughter. So usually they end up in the middle of the film, and they were killed by other bad men, like victimized. Always a woman role was being a victim. So, but nowadays they say that our system is totally changed. Our role, something they usually said we had a great change in our cinema image of a woman, but still, there's some point of view is still the same. So documentary made by the good young director, woman director, shows that a very narrow scale. So woman who tried to have a good job, a young woman who tried to have a good marriage, a woman who tried to be a good daughter. That's our main image from the documentary even. So we need more time to develop those kind of storytelling, make more good films. But it's very interesting.
Yes. And of course, things are changing now, but even now, when, during this pandemic, we're seeing another pandemic of streaming services, right? There have been so many OTT platforms here, and we're creating new content, but I'm not mentioning the name of the film, but there have been films made by Bangladeshi directors that doesn't have any women character. I mean, they were from such a guy's perspective. in their world, women didn't even exist, and that's even happening in 2020 and 2021. So that's yeah. So yeah, of course, we're moving forward. We have reasons to celebrate, but there are also those perspectives that aren't changing. And Tumpapu actually wanted me to discuss about how we see the representation of women in the festivals, since I've been to some. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, I mean, how our female directors have been represented in the festivals that I've been to. Like in Kerala International Film Festival, which is like, there are two best film festivals in India, IFFI and Kerala. And there, people were talking about Made in Bangladesh. Now, I went there in December 2019, yes. And people were talking about Rubaiyat Hossain's Made in Bangladesh. They were very proud of it. And another film they were talking about, I mean, since I'm from Bangladesh, they were talking about that to me, was Bini Shutoy, that stars Joy Ahsan. So yeah, so a very strong female representation and a very different female character there. But of course, it didn't have a theatrical release yet, so we haven't been able to see it yet. But then that was a major focus in that festival. And another film making the rounds in the festivals now is Debris of Desire. There we have, we'll be able to see it here. And Opikorim plays a very, very different role from from how we see the leading ladies to be, So you'll be able to see that here, and that has been making rounds in the major festivals last year. So yeah, another film I would like to say was Tushi, Shumara Shejuti Tushi's, yeah. Yeah, her film won the Best Film Award in Shiliguri when I was there. And Meenalap, yes, yes. Yeah, that also garnered a lot of praise in the festival circuit. So wherever I've been in the international festival circuits, I've heard a lot of praise, and most of those praises were centered towards some women. So we're very proud of what we've been able to accomplish, even with all the odds that are stacked against us. So would Kishwar, please? Yeah, I think we've run enough. Yeah, I'd like to welcome Kishwar to wrap it up. Yeah, thank you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you very much, Mehzad Ghalib. Actually, the theme that Mehzad has chosen is very vital to the backdrop of our films, 1970s. And for the younger people here, I think they were non-existent in those days. And the format was also different, but nevertheless, this has had a strong impact in our, I would call it alternative films, if you like it, or the, very different. And the characters are not flat at all. And the films that Mehzad has mentioned here, I won't repeat. But all those films, in my observation, the characterization and the portrayal is not flat. They're round characters, they're dynamic, and they're very, very contemporary. That's the main remarkable thing which has made the films lifelong, and they will remain, and they will keep the impact forever in our film movements, I would say. Like the one that Mehzad had mentioned, the three movies, the three films, Shurjo Konna is different, Alamgir Kabir, very, very different and offbeat. The treatment is different, but Shirjo Digol Bari is the, I would call it a typical rural portrayal. But the women in all these films are very, very strong and dormant and kind of revolutionary against the male dominating, male dominance and male chauvinistic society. And Sue was also discussing about the taboos that women faces smoking in public. We have the same thing. Yes, And I noticed that they have it in Korea as well. I don't know whether it's a question of survivor or a question of, what would I call it? Um, you know, because they are impoverished, the poor people. So just to kind of suppress the hunger and the appetite, they smoke possibly. And that's kind of accepted, but not a very respectable norm in the society. But obviously, yes, in the urban society, it wasn't acceptable for women to smoke. But now the younger generation, I mean, it's a different thing altogether. And about the other films, yes, Shurjo Digal Bari was very, very difficult to fathom and to treat, and because it was not in the commercial type of trend. The first art film, yeah, she has mentioned, and you can add.
That is actually Shurjo Digal Bari, the second film, The Ominous House, I have discussed. This is the first art film of Bangladesh, because you know, there was a movement, a film society movement, and the main thing was that we receive a few grants from government to make, you know, different kind of films, different genre films. So Shurjo Digal Bari is the first art film, first Bangladesh government's grants film. So we are getting grants every year from that, but it has been started from Shurjo Digal Bari, Women's House. In that point of view, this is a very important film. And other thing I will like to mention, then I have talked to the directors, because one of them, he was my teacher when I did my diploma from BCTI. So he said, I said, did you make the film in new realistic this is the first new realistic film of Bangladesh, you can say. So, I mean, you know, you can find similarities with Satyajit Ray films as treatment-wise, you know, as genre-wise. This is the first new realistic film. Then I asked Shakir Bhai, then why did you do this? Because you are film activist, that is why you have chosen this genre. He said, no, there's no other option. That for making this film, I have to take the new realistic genre to make the realistic picturization of the film, you know. So that is also very interesting about this film. So there was actress in this film, the main actress Jagun was changed actually before this, who Dolly Anwar, who played actually Jagun in the screen. Before her, one other actress was chosen, but she could not continue acting without her blouse. You know, it was being very difficult at that time to shoot without her blouse, because village women didn't wear blouse at that time. Even nowadays, it is not mandatory to wear blouse in the village areas. Anyway, things has changed, but they had shoot a few কি বলে এটাকে, কিছুক্ষণ পর, a few seconds, and then they changed the actress, and the Dolly and Anwar did the justice. Thank you very much. I think I've talked too much.
No, thank you, Mehzad. That was wonderful. And a little observation again. Sorry if I'm boring you people. The other two, I mean, against this Shurjo Digal Bari, the Ominous House, the other two, again, they have used music, you see, to a great deal. Especially Shurjo Konna. I mean, I don't know about others, but we as Bangladeshis, it does kind of tap our taste and our sense. Beautifully made, beautiful singers. They've used the best producers, best film directors, and best vocalists in both the other films. It's not a compromise. I mean, they have kind of juxtaposed it for the need of the taste of the wide audience. And Shurjo Digal Bari does not leave any room for much music and all that stuff, because it's a purely based on the realistic situation of the country. But anyway, that was a big breakthrough for us in the 70s, which again continued then later till 80s and 90s and all that stuff. Can I wind up now? Would you like to say anything? Any questions from anyone? I always wind up using Rabindranath Thakur, Rabindranath
I have
Tagore.
a question.
Please.
Yes, I have a question. 1970s in Korea, we have a dictatorism, President Park, and 1980s, we have President Chun. And those are two decades in our country. Many films are talking about like a pop culture or like a woman with a nudism, because those films are not censored by the government. That's why many filmmakers, they try to make a woman and a man's love story with a bad woman, appear their family, broke the family. That kind of story were made by film so many times because the government that time, the filmmakers who tried to talk about our social problem or the problem in our society is strongly banned by government. That's why we flourished. Actually, those kind of female became very totally wasted commercially. That's the thing that our that time our system of our cinema making field, the industry were censored by government. That's why it happened. So how about Bangladesh? Is there any censorship to, is there any other kind of the situation that the woman's film could be made by filmmakers, because other stories who try to talk about the social problem was strongly banned by government. That's why it happens, or like the side effect. I'm just curious.
We do have the censorship board, which is controlled by the government as well. Yeah, but I don't want to bring in political political issues right now, but I would just say that right now we have a favorable and a conducive situation with regards to the censorship, because they're more liberal, more tolerant, and more realistic. That's about all. I mean, commercialism is not the order of the day. And we have seen a cultural presentation this morning. I don't know, Sue, whether you saw it. Cultural program in the morning. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, actually it was all in Bangla, but it depicted the people, the women folk, the ladies of our country. They are the iconic leaders who represented education, who represented female, I wouldn't say feminism really, but it's the emancipation of people of our country, and politically, obviously, they had a big impact. So this is the venue which we are having. This is a government venue, this Shilpakala Academy. So which kind of tells everyone what kind of their views are regarding censorship, and so it's not a question of whether it's right or wrong, but it's a question of acceptability.
No,
And
I don't think it's a right or wrong. It's more
Yeah.
like a double-edged sword. It's more like both sides. We should think about it. We should understand the society or the political movement, or feminism, the movement.
Yes.
I think I'm really open to those kind of situation. But my whole point is those kind of censorship could influence the woman's role in the films
Yes.
or not. I think
I
it
get your
is.
point.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
All
you
right.
very
Thank
much.
you for your yes.
Yeah, so from that point of view, I think women are more vocal, whether it be the women filmmakers or the women actors or the women characters or the writers, even the writers. Yes. So we are looking forward to more films like that in future. And thank you very much, Sue, for joining in. I don't know what's the time in Korea right now, but it was really, really enriching on our part to have you with us. And I will end up with Tagore's poetry, which I always do, which sums up the the situation. সংকোচেরও বিহ্বলতা নিজেরই অপমান সংকটেরও কল্পনাতে হইও না মৃয়মান মুক্ত করো ভয় আপনা মাঝে শক্তি ধরো নিজেরে করো জয় shying away in hesitation is self-humiliation shy away never imagining misery or dejection free from fear. So we have to free ourselves from fear, unleash inner strength to win over, shelter the weak, quell the evil, which means that this emancipation is nothing aggressive. It embraces everyone with warmth, with love and care. But be strong, and that's the inner strength we must all adapt. You're free from fear, your ability to rely on self, doubt never, no doubt. You should not have any doubts or hesitations. When ethics welcome blowing war bugle, offer your life in silence. Be humble, free from fear. In tasks arduous, reveal your character. This has been translated by Dipankar Chaudhary, which I downloaded from YouTube. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to a big thank you to the keynote speaker and the other speakers and our dear audience, the cameraman, everyone working behind it. We welcome you to the next session today to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. I miss you all.
We miss you too.
We miss you too, so thank you
I
very
miss
much.
you.
감사합니다, Suli. 감사합니다 means thank you very much. It's in Korean.
Thank you in Korea.
Anyway, now this session is the first session is going to be finished now. The next session will be start at 2 o'clock. Please join us at 2 o'clock in Bangladesh time. So we're gonna have a lunch break now in Dhaka. So I'm expecting everybody who are in the theater or watching online, please join us after 1 hour around, please, maybe 5 or 10 minutes after or before. So we're gonna see you soon. Please stay connected. Thank you very much.
I have a lunch delivery, Ahmed.
Bye-bye. I'll send you the food by parcel, don't worry.
Yes. Bye.
Ciao, bye.
Sick.